Welcome back to The Courage to Speak with me, Leonie Mellinger, the podcast that asks, what does it take to have the courage to speak up and speak out in life? My guest today is broadcaster and journalist India Willoughby. She is Britain's first transgender national television newsreader and co-host of ITV's Loose Women. India was also a housemate on Celebrity Big Brother and has appeared on a wide range of programmes including BBC Question Time, First Dates and Come Dine With Me. In 2017, she won the Diversity in Media Award. Last year, India was nominated as one of the UK's Women of the Year. More recently, her activism has made headlines, most notably for challenging J.K. Rowling over her views on transgender rights. In May, India became the first trans person in the world appointed as patron of a professional sports club, rugby league team Keighley Cougars. Notwithstanding the abuse she receives on a daily basis, India continues to speak up and speak out for herself and the trans community. Welcome, India. I'm delighted to have you here as my guest.
I'm really delighted that you've invited me, Leonie. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
I'd like to start with asking you, you've said you can't remember a time when you didn't feel like a female and you felt you'd been born in the wrong body. Did you speak to any family or friends about your feelings when you were a child?
Oh, no. I grew up, I was born in 1965 in London. So predominantly I was growing up in the 70s. And as you can imagine, even now being trans is still to a certain degree taboo in certain quarters. So way back in 1970, it just wasn't really heard of in any way. I don't think I actually heard the word trans until I was probably around the age of 10 or 11, something like that. So in the really early days, I was just me, as it were. I was just myself.
Yeah.
But I can remember distinctly, the first episode I can remember is certainly before going to junior school, which in the 1970s you started at the age of 5.
Yeah.
And before that, there was a time I was at my gran's.
Yes.
And my family situation was that my mum had moved down to swinging 60s London in the 1960s, got married, had my brother, but the marriage didn't turn out right. So my mum went back and we were living with my grandma and my pop, who was my granddad, but we called him Pop. And so that's where we were living. And on this particular day, my gran was getting ready to go somewhere and I was playing with her makeup, just normal stuff on my face and what have you. And I can remember my gran at the time spinning round, and not in a nasty way, but she was really shocked. I could tell she was really shocked that I'd managed to kind of make my face up, probably with clown lips and stuff.
What did she say?
And she was saying, no, boys don't do that. That's not what boys do. So it wasn't an aggressive thing. It wasn't like, she was hitting me or anything like that. But I became very aware on that occasion, I don't really understand, what's gone wrong here.
And how did you feel about that?
Not bad.
Yeah.
It was just because obviously at that age, when you're preschool, you're just a sponge. You're just absorbing, what's right and what's wrong, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I started junior school, and I was just naturally kind of gravitating towards, I remember one instance, there used to be a whistle at the end of playtime and all the boys lined up and all the girls lined up. And I used to tend to go with the girls and they would make me go back. And so, I just went back and it was no big deal.
Yeah. But your mum remarried, I gather, to a footballer, which meant you had to move around the country a lot, which must have been quite difficult because you had to constantly make new friends. Was that challenging?
Do you know what? I absolutely hated it. I really, really did, because exactly what you're saying there. And I guess the closest thing would be, I guess, for people who are in the military, who maybe get transferred from base to base. And it's a life where no sooner have you made friends in one school, then you're moving on. Yeah. And as a kid, obviously, when you've made good friends and you've known them for 2 years, 2 years is a lifetime. When you're 6 and 7. It's like a long time. And then you're suddenly wrenched away and you're going to a completely different part of the country. It's a pretty big deal. But I was really lucky, actually, because in amongst all that, the mainstay of my childhood really was my gran and pop in Carlisle. So every school holiday, I loved them to bits. So I would always pester my mum for me to be able to go back to Carlisle. And that's where I literally had every school holiday was in Carlisle. So I would head north.
So what were they like? How did they influence who you were?
My gran and pop.
Yeah.
They were actually very like, if you're old enough to remember, Stan and Hilda Ogden on Coronation Street. My gran was physically the actual double of Hilda, down to the hairnet and the curlers, and what have you. And my pop was, well, I absolutely idolised Pop. Pop's a film in himself. Now, Pop came from a very wealthy family. And how we met Hilda Ogden, my gran, she was a 16-year-old girl who at the time was scrubbing the stone steps of their big house. And they were both 15, 16, something like that. And Pop's mum and dad called him into the room and said, you can't be associated with this girl because it's a different class kind of thing. And he wasn't having it. So they ended up running away to Gretna Green, which is only 5 miles away from Carlisle. It's just over the border. And they got married. So all very romantic. But they came back and the wealthy side of the family actually said, that's it. You're finished. You're on your own. And then the war came and they joined up. He was in the Navy, she was in the Army, and what have you. But they were a very working class kind of couple. You know, they lived it was a council house. It was well looked after and everything. And we never really wanted for anything. But it was a very traditional working class 1970s time. And I was generally happy, even though I had this nagging thing inside of me. Everything around me, nobody had a clue really what was going on. I hid it really well. Right,
but that must have been really challenging and quite lonely.
Yeah, I think it was, certainly initially, it was more the confusion. I knew that if I talked about it, it would be a big thing, because when I looked around in the world, the only thing close to anything as I was feeling was at the time you had people doing drag on TV. So you had people like Dick Emery, who was a comedian of the time.
Danny
LaRue, Les Dawson. And I hated it because I was watching TV and I could see this as the closest thing that was visible in the world at the time to how I felt. But it wasn't who I was. That's not who I was. And I could see that they were men, but they were essentially they were dressing up, but they were inviting mockery. And everyone was around them laughing and it was all a big joke. Whereas how I felt, it definitely wasn't a joke. And I was terrified. I thought, oh my God, you know, if I ever did tell somebody how I feel, that I need to tell you something, I don't know how to explain this, but I'm a girl. They would laugh.
I can't imagine what that must have been like, because to make relationships with people, you have to reveal something. You reveal yourself, don't you? And so to have something so fundamental that you don't actually, even to your best friend, say, must have been incredibly hard. So what were your relationships with your friends like?
Yeah, well, I had normal, friends. I was popular, and I knew just from my mum being married to a footballer, and that there being lots of football stuff around us all the time. I can remember thinking, within a couple of years of starting junior school, football is the key. That's how, if you're going to be a boy, that's how all the boys love football. So become good at football and you'll have a good time. And I can remember going out with a football and practicing for hours and hours, and oh my God, it was relentless. And I remember my pop and grandma, because I knocked a hole I used to knock the ball against their wall, and I knocked some brickwork off, just not by hitting it hard, but it was just the repetitiveness of doing it. And I did actually end up pretty good at football as a result. But to the outside world, nobody knew what was going on. And during that time, I was trying to figure it out myself. Yeah. And I've just remembered something else. Do you know what? I haven't even thought about this for probably 30 years. And it's just because we're talking about school. Yeah. I remember there was a Ladybird book, if people can remember those, if they're of a certain age. And it was about fairy tales and fables. And there was one story in the school library in this Ladybird book. And it was about, if you could kiss your elbow, you would turn into a girl.
Right.
And I can remember, I read this line and I thought, oh my God, this is incredible. And I can remember going home as a kid, I'd probably be about 6 or 7 at the time, and actually trying to
kiss
do that.
Your elbow.
By the way, you can't do it. But if you want to have a go, you can't kiss your elbow. But yeah, so even at 6 or 7, I was aware, this sounds really contradictory, I was aware that I was a girl, but I was aware that I wasn't a girl. Yes. And I was aware that I needed to try and fix it in some way. But I was also aware that I couldn't ask for help, because if I did ask for help, it would be a really big deal. People would either think I was crazy, or they would just point and laugh. I would lose all my friends. Yeah. Guaranteed. So you just kind of bury it down, and you kind of keep quiet. And I can remember spells, although I was, even though I say so, I was really popular, and I had lots of friends. Yes.
So you're quite outgoing then?
Yeah, and I think it helped because obviously I had a brother. There was only a year between us, so you're always active as a kid. You're doing something. At the end of the day. Yeah. But there were spells, there was certainly, weeks when I would go completely quiet and I would just withdraw. And I can remember, my mum or my papa, grandma saying things like, are you okay? Are you upset or something? And I would say, no, I'm fine. But I would be quiet, for that week or so. And I think that was probably me just kind of internally trying to figure it out, because the thing is, as a kid, it's complicated enough as an adult being trans and understanding it, and really there is nothing to understand because you just are. It's just as simple as that. But as a kid, it's even more so, because you don't even have the building blocks or the framework to try and start to work out what is going on. You just know that you feel this particular way.
And then you trained as a journalist and worked in local radio and did 10 years at ITV Border reading the news. How difficult was it doing a job that required you to communicate in such a public way? I mean, wouldn't it have been easier to do a less visible job?
Definitely.
So,
I mean, with hindsight, it's probably the worst job in the world to have done, because I was becoming ingrained in everybody in my region at the time, which was Cumbria, Southwest Scotland, the Isle of Man. I was in everybody's living room at 6 o'clock every night. And I had this thing inside me that at the time, you know, I wasn't planning to act on it, because by then I thought I had it under control. I'd kind of boxed it off, and I'd come to the conclusion, well, this is how I feel, but it's under control. You know, I feel this way, but I don't have to do anything on it. But I'd always been good at words, and I'd always been good at chatting and writing, linguistic kind of things. So I did love, really, being a journalist was fantastic. It was perfect for me, because I get bored very easily. And the great thing about journalism is every day it's a different story. You never know what's going to happen next. So it suited me down to the ground in that respect. But obviously the downside was this thing that you were on TV, and when I was getting to the stage where I just literally couldn't go on anymore, this kind of internal box that I'd made for myself was starting to crumble then, and life was becoming really difficult. It was actually, and I can remember when it was all coming to a head, I was actually, it sounds really boring, I was in the studio, and I was presenting the news, and we had a live link up with this person in Scotland, and they were talking about the Waverley rail line, which goes from Edinburgh to Carlisle, and it's been closed for donkey's years, and they were going to open it up. And it was a really boring political story, and I was talking to this guy in a suit down the line, and he was on the screen. And when he talks, the person in the studio, the viewers aren't seeing you. So you have a few seconds where you can kind of look around the monitors in the studio, and you can check that the angles are right and how you're looking and everything. And I looked in the monitor this night, and I thought, oh my God. There was this bloke looking at me, you know, with like really short hair, tie, kind of like a Rick Astley sort of suit and everything. And it kind of knocked me for six.
You mean you were looking at yourself?
I was looking at myself,
and that
in the monitor.
That freaked you out suddenly.
But it really freaked me out that night. And this guy was talking away, and I kind of lost track of what he was saying. And then when you're reading the news, you have an earpiece in, and the gallery, the people with all the knobs and the buttons, they're actually speaking to you. And he'd said something, and the gallery was saying, "Answer! You need to answer him." And I'd missed it. I'd completely missed it because this image of myself had thrown me. And that, I think that's the kind of night when I went home and I thought, something's got to change. You know, this is becoming really bad.
And you got married, didn't you? So were you married by then?
Was I married at that point? Yeah, I was married at that point.
What made you get married?
Well, I guess, again, it's when you grow up, you know, that there are certain expectations on everybody, and this isn't just trans people. You know, the same kind of thing applies to people who are gay and lesbian. Absolutely. And maybe not so much these days, but certainly the expectations in the 60s and 70s were that, you know, people would grow up, and it was very much, you know, you would meet somebody and you would get married, you would have kids, and that would be the story. And the old me, I never had a problem attracting girls. I never went looking for girls particularly, but I always had girls around me. And again, I was really lucky in some respects. They were always the kind of the prettier girls.
Yes.
But I was totally ambivalent to sex. I wasn't attracted to men.
Yeah.
I was just not interested in sex at all. I did like the kind of the romance of it, and the friendship side. My first girlfriend that I had was at secondary school, and we're still in touch actually. She was called Linda Holmes. Big shout out to Linda if you're listening. And I went out with Linda from the age of 12 to about 23.
Gosh.
Now, if you can imagine, for somebody in their teen years to have that
is unusual.
Is unusual. But I think it was like that And it was a normal relationship, you know. There was nothing unusual about it. It was a normal boy-girl kind of relationship, but it went that long because it was a friend. It was like a proper. I can get upset now even thinking about it. It was like a proper thing, you know, like friendship as well.
Lovely.
And she's been great, you know, like even subsequently.
So why didn't you marry her?
Well, I know. Do you know what? I've often thought that, but no, it just kind of petered out, you know, when we were after a decade or so at that age.
Yes, I can.
You know, it kind of just petered out.
Yeah.
So after Linda, I would have, you know, the occasional kind of girlfriend. But there would never really be anything physical or anything like that. But then I was getting to a stage of life where everybody around me was getting married, all my friends. It was getting harder to go out on a Friday or Saturday night because everybody was married and what have you. And I did meet somebody, and we did get on and everything was fine, and it was a bit of a whirlwind romance. And I think probably within a year of meeting her, we were married, and then the following year, you know, she was pregnant. But then the year after that, she met somebody else, which is fine, and so we split up, which, you know, with hindsight is no particular surprise really, but again, it had nothing to do with me being who I am, because I wasn't acting on that at that time.
And then I was intrigued to learn that you came up with this extraordinary idea of having an alternative life in another city.
That's right. Yeah.
So you spent like 5 days. And who were you? Who did you show up as in this alternative life? Yeah.
So, you know, we parted ways. We split up, and 3 or 4 years went on, and I was just being my normal self. But 3 or 4 years on from that, that's when I started to have times like as I've just described there, where I would kind of freeze in front of the camera because I would catch sight of myself, and I just realized that this was getting really bad, that the old adage about you can't run away from yourself is absolutely true. Even if you bottle it up for 30 or 40 years, it's still there. And it was kind of a wake-up moment, and I started to take stock of my life, and I was thinking, well, look, I'm probably halfway through my life. So I've only got 30, 40 years left. Am I really going to spend the one life that I've got being somebody who I never really was? Just for the benefit of others? Because to me, it was if I was an actor in a play and the curtain had gone up, but somebody had given me the wrong script, and everybody was looking, expecting me to play this part, and I had the lines, and the question was, was I going to start reciting the line, or was I going to hold my hand up and say, whoa, hold on, stop the play? And I wasn't brave enough up until then to say, I'm sorry, there's been a mistake. But I was also aware that obviously when you've had half of a lifetime as somebody else, you have all these people around you who you really care for and who love you as well. And I knew that they would be both A, shocked, and B, they would grieve because they're going to be saying goodbye to this person that they love. And I was trying to work out a way. And so I came up with this idea, and I thought, well, what if I could split my life in two and be two people at the same time and keep everybody happy? Then I would have the oxygen of being myself, so I wouldn't feel like I was starting to feel where life was barely worth going on with. But I was keeping alive this other person for them. Again, I'm getting upset even thinking about it. I don't know how I got through it. So what I did, I packed in my job on TV. I quit. And where I lived, my job was like a dream job, being on telly every night. You know, there was no big employers around or anything like that. It was great money. It was great hours. It was a fantastic job. But I had to be myself.
Yeah.
But I couldn't have both. So I just said, I'm leaving. That's the end. And off I went. So I faked some references, and I ended up getting a job in the NHS in Newcastle, which is 1 hour away from Carlisle.
Right.
Newcastle on the east coast, Carlisle on the west coast. And so for Monday to Friday, I worked in an office as a press officer as Joanne Charles.
Really?
And so the reason that I picked those names were, I was trying to think, well, what am I going to call myself? I can't use Willoughby, because Willoughby's a kind of surname that stands out, and people might put two and two together and they'll think, oh, there was a Willoughby in reading the news over there, and now there's a Willoughby over here.
Yes.
And then I would, my cover would be blown.
Yeah.
So I thought, I know, my middle name's Charles. I can use that. Lots of people have Charles as a surname. So I thought, right, I'll use Charles as the surname. And then, and I mean this in the best possible way to all the Joannes out there, I thought I need a Christian name that doesn't stand out.
Yeah.
That isn't going to attract attention. And I was thinking, and obviously with my old name being a J, I thought, oh, well Joanne.
Okay.
That will kind of fit. And so that's
sense.
how I came to be Joanne Charles. But then I was thinking, I need identification and what have you. So I got in touch with the passport office. Again, I don't know whether this is even possible these days, because they may have changed all the rules. And you're probably aware that when your passport expires, you're supposed to contact them, and you send your old one in and they send you a new one out. So I got in touch with the passport office. I did this letter explaining that, I was Joanne Charles and I needed this thing. My passport was missing, and they sent me one out. I mean, they'd said send your old one in as verification.
Yeah.
But I never did,
But
and they never followed it up.
You didn't need a birth certificate? Nothing?
No.
Good heavens.
And they never followed it up. So I ended up at that time, I actually had 2 passports in 2 different names.
Amazing.
Which is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
You hear all these stories about terrorism. I wasn't a trans terrorist, by the way. But it just shows you how, there can be these glitches in the system, as it were. So essentially, for 5 years, Monday to Friday, I was Joanne Charles. And then when work finished at 4 o'clock on Friday, I would jump in the car in the office car park, and I would drive along the A69 that connects Newcastle with Carlisle, and en route I would be transforming literally at 70 miles an hour
And
in the car with wipes, with clothes,
absolutely incredible.
steering sometimes. This sounds awful, but just kind of juggling the thing. And then I would get to Carlisle an hour later as the old me.
So friends and family didn't ever visit you in Newcastle?
Never visited me, no.
And you kept this up for 5 years?
For 5 years.
That's
and initially
incredible.
I thought I cracked it. I thought, God, why has nobody thought of this before? Because it's just perfect.
And you
it's not
made
gonna
new
cost you
friends
anything. I had 2 sets of friends, 2 passports, 2 wardrobes, and neither world knew the other existed. I'd grown my hair at the time. I had like a shoulder length bob.
Right.
So when I was in Newcastle, I could wear it, just as a bob, as it were. But when I went back to Carlisle, I kind of slicked it back.
Incredible.
And what have you. And initially I thought, I've cracked it. But then after 5 years, I knew who I was.
Yes.
And I knew it was becoming harder and harder to go back on a weekend and become the old me. It was like pulling on a straitjacket.
So you must have felt so much freer.
Oh, so much freer.
When you're in Newcastle.
There was no question. This was who I was.
Incredible.
And that's when I kind of decided just to come clean with everybody.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you that what was the point that motivated you to tell your mother, and how did you summon up the courage to do it?
Just because I just reached a point where I just knew that this was me. There was nothing fake or pretend about it. This was me.
But you spent so long trying to protect your family and friends.
Yeah.
So that moment must have been really challenging.
It was really difficult because, and this sounds strange, because if you read a lot of trans life stories, and everybody's different, but you often read a story where the trans person hates their old self and can't wait to kill them off. Whereas it wasn't quite like that for me, because the old me, and I talk about him in that tense and as a third person, because it feels so alien to me now. He wasn't a bad person, and it wasn't his fault, that he had to be killed off.
Yeah.
In an ideal situation, there would have been two bodies, and he could have gone his way and I could have gone my way. But I was very aware, because I had a really close relationship, as I say, with my pop, who I idolised, and I knew he thought I was fantastic, and he used to say, you're either going to end up a star or you're going to end up in jail. one of the two. But we had so many, great times together.
Yes. So
I knew that he would have been upset. I knew my mum would be upset. I knew my brother and sister would be shocked.
Yeah.
More than anything else. And I had all that going on. But I just reached a stage where it just had to be done. I'd done my very best to keep everybody happy by splitting myself in two.
You couldn't have done more.
But if I could have gone on forever, I would have. But I just reached a point where I couldn't, and I had to bring those two train tracks together and say, this is me.
So was it your mother you told first?
Yeah, well, how I did it was, again, because I'm a real chicken, I am really. So I thought, oh God, I can't do this face to face. It'll be an absolute nightmare. So I made a list of people, because support is so important to trans people. I thought if the first person that I tell disowns me, it'll destroy me.
Yeah.
I'll be distraught. So I thought, right, make a list and put the person most likely to accept you at the top and the person who's least likely to accept you at the bottom. So my mum was at the top and my sister was actually at the bottom, because me and my sister have always fought like cat and dog.
Right.
On everything, what channel to watch, where we go to eat, everything is an argument, everything. So I told my mum by email, and she emailed back really quickly. I could tell that she was upset in the email, but she did respond really quickly. But I always remember, again, I get a little bit upset just thinking about it. She put in a line saying at the end of the day, you're my child, and I've got your back, and I'll be like a tiger, on your side if anyone tries to come for you. So that made me really strong. So then I told other people, and it went well. Everybody was supportive and what have you. And then I got to my sister, and I thought, oh my God, here we go. So I sent her the email. It went quiet. There wasn't any quick reply from her.
Right.
And it took about an hour or so. But she did the same. She came back and she says, right, anyone has a go at you,
oh,
I'm on your side.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and she's like a real scrappy.
Oh, brilliant.
You don't want to mess with my sister. So in that respect, it went really well.
So looking back, do you wish that you had done it earlier?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know we don't want to get too political at the moment because it's so toxic and the things that are said about trans people, but it's really important, you know, that we listen to trans kids. Everybody knows who they are around the age of 3 and 4. Now, if you're not a trans person and your body matches what your brain is telling you, then it's not really something you notice growing up.
Yeah.
Because you're always in sync.
Yes.
So it's like tasting water. There is no flavour to it whatsoever. Whereas if you're trans, you become aware of this disconnect, and it's very disorientating. And you as I tried to explain earlier on, you're trying to figure out what the conflict is.
Yes.
So trans kids know who they are just as much as non-trans kids do. And the reason that why at the moment it's very topical, I'll just touch on this briefly. Obviously there's a big row about puberty blockers being given to kids. The reason that trans kids need puberty blockers is they don't want to develop the body that is going to make them stand out and become a target, because it's so toxic out there. And the people who do not like trans people, and you see them on social media every day, that's who they're looking for. They're looking for targets. So from my perspective and from the trans community, all we're trying to do, we're trying to assimilate as best we possibly can, just to fit into the world, and then nobody notices. I was recently at the Attitude Awards 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I met Ella Morgan. I don't know if you know Ella Morgan. She was on Married at First Sight.
Oh, yes.
A reality show earlier this year.
Yes.
Beautiful girl.
Yeah.
And she'd had, you know, she hadn't gone through a male puberty. Totally indistinguishable. Yes. And she's going to have a great life because there's no difference whatsoever. I could get really into the nitty gritty and this, you know, from the fact that, you know, all human beings actually start off as female. I don't know if you know that. For the first 6 to 8 weeks or so.
Do you mean as the fetus?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the default design, as it were. So you know, the biology thing is really interesting, but I don't really care as to why, or how, having to provide an explanation to somebody as to why I'm trans and why I'm a woman. I just am, just as anyone else.
And when you became a big national story after your transition and you were invited onto Loose Women, were you nervous about how you'd be received?
I was. Well, the first time, how Loose Women worked was, obviously I'd given up my job in TV, and I'd done this 5 years doing an office job with the NHS. And then I thought, well, why did I give up my job that, you know, that I really loved? I shouldn't have to give it up just because of who I am. And at the time, inclusivity and diversity were actually still good things. It's kind of changed recently, but they were really good things to be. So I got in touch with ITV, and they gave me a job back in the newsroom. They wouldn't put me on screen though, but they gave me a job in the newsroom doing production journalism, which is basically writing the bulletins and the scripts and sorting out the order of stories. And on this particular day, there was a live story happening, and they'd ran out of reporters. In the office, and I could see these two people at the end of the room with clipboards that kept looking at me, and then when they caught my eye they would look away, and eventually one of them came over and said, hi India, would you mind going and doing a live report at this, it was a jazz festival in Lockerbie, would you mind going and doing a live report? And I says, oh yeah, absolutely fine. So I went and I did this live report, and it went well, and somebody had seen it and they contacted the papers, and then it became a big story, you know, trans reporter on ITV, blah, 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 blah. And Loose Women, on the back of that, had invited me on as a guest just to tell my story. so I went on, and I just loved it because I was back in TV. And I think the first question they said something, well, tell us about yourself, India, what have been going on? And I says, well, I've had this secret that I've kept quiet about for decades. And they said, well, what was that? And I says, I never liked my wife's Yorkshire puddings. The audience roared with laughter. And so I knew from then on, it was really warm and receptive, and we had a good giggle. It was a great show. And I came off, it was like a 5-minute chat and what have you. It went really well. And then the runner came to get me, and he says, oh my God, have you seen social media? I said, no. He says, oh, they absolutely love you. Look at this. And I said, oh my God, this is incredible. So then I went home, and then a couple of days later, they said, look, we actually think you should come on and be a loose woman. I thought, oh God, this is like Hollywood. It's like for somebody like me, that's just incredible. So I said, thank you very much. That's just amazing. Yeah. So that's what I did for a few shows. I think the first one I did after that, I was interviewing Priscilla Presley, which was incredible.
Amazing.
Like Elvis. Yeah. Elvis's wife. So, that was really good.
Yeah. So you had such a positive response at first. When did things change? When did it start to get so difficult for the trans community?
Well, it was around that time, and in some ways I think I personally was one of the triggers of the war that we have at the moment, because
you were so public.
It was the year 2017, and what happened was I was starting to do Loose Women, and everything was fine, and all the press and the response from the public was really positive. And then I got an invite to go on BBC Woman's Hour with Jenny Murray, and they sent a car around, and I went to the local radio station. If I remember, we had to do it down the line because I'd popped back up to Newcastle. That was it. Yeah. But I popped into BBC Radio Newcastle to do it down the line, but it was a national. It was going out BBC Woman's Hour, and it was a live interview. And I was thinking, it's just going to be another jolly thing. How great, you know, you're doing Loose Women. This is fantastic. It's what a wonderful world we live in. And so I went into it all like quite kind of bouncy and thing. And Jenny Murray's first question was, "What qualifies you to be a woman?" Oh. And I thought, oh, that's really... And then I tried to give a kind of light answer because I was thinking it was a sort of entertainment type of interview. And then a second question was, have you read Judith Butler? And I was thinking, who's Judith Butler? I know who she is now. She's a feminist who's written loads of books. But it was all really kind of heavy questions, inquisitory, and it was like being on trial. So after 2 minutes or so of this, I thought, right, because I'm the kind of person, if anyone follows me on Twitter, they will know, if people come for me, I will respond in kind. That's just who I am, and you know how I was brought up. My pop always said, you know, if anyone has a go at you, you hit them back as hard as they hit you. Yeah. So then the conversation between me and Jenny Murray started to become more combative. And so it wound up, and it was really frosty. And then a couple of days later, she wrote this big article in the Sunday Times saying India Willoughby is not a real woman. 2-page, I think it was a 2-page spread in the Times. And, obviously I was shocked. My mum was shocked. It was awful. It was terrible. But this shows you how quickly times have changed. So that was 2017. On the back of that, the BBC suspended Jenny Murray
Okay.
from her job. And she wasn't doing BBC Woman's Hour for so many months. I can't remember how long it was, but it was certainly a period of months. Now, that is when what we now know as the gender critical movement
began,
kicked off.
Right.
There was a response to that, and this big debate about what is a woman, and it all took off from there. So that's why I was, certainly as far as the UK is concerned, one of the triggers for it to happen. And since then, obviously, it's snowballed into what we have now.
You had a particularly appalling time when you were a guest on the panel of BBC Question Time. And
that was horrendous.
I mean, did you not expect... I mean, what gave you the courage to go on that? Because...
Yeah, well, I kind of felt I had to do it because, sadly, the way the world's gone, you know, we're probably the most talked about minority of the moment, even more than asylum seekers. But the difference is that obviously there are a lot of people who rightly will stick up for asylum seekers, and I'm one of them, 100%. But there aren't that many people who will stick up for trans people. So you end up with a situation where everything that comes out of the media, whether it's print or broadcast, is very negative, and the trans population are cast as a problem for society, a threat in some way. So when an opportunity came along to do a show like BBC Question Time, I thought it was really important because you're reaching a mainstream big audience. So I turned up, and my mum had warned me beforehand. It was actually good advice. She says, right, don't you be your normal self, because I know you know, if anyone comes at you, you'll go for them.
Yeah.
And that's what my original idea was. And I thought, oh, right, okay. And she says, bite your tongue, you know, do not say anything. And I went on, and as soon as I went in the actual auditorium, I felt like I was at a public hanging. There was an atmosphere in the audience. And this sounds very sort of conspiracy theory, but I know it's true from people I know within the industry. And what had happened, when they have a show like BBC Question Time, they say which town they're going to be going to next, and then you can apply for tickets for that particular show. Now, the people who don't like people like me, the trans population, are extremely obsessive, and they know every kind of detail. So they'd flooded the applications for tickets for this particular event. So I literally knew as soon as I walked in with a smile, and I was doing all the normal thing. But the look back, it was like being at my own execution. And I thought, oh my God, here we go. And it was absolutely horrendous. It was terrible. But, and I came off the show, I was really upset because nobody had stuck up for me. And I'd followed my mum's instructions by biting my tongue, even though I wanted to bite back.
Yeah.
But all that anger, you know, that I wanted to vent back at them, what they were giving to me, I had to swallow it. And it was a horrible, horrible feeling. So when I was in the car, they'd sent a car for me to drive me back from Glasgow to Newcastle. I was so upset. And I'd rang my friend, another woman who's trans, called Paris Lees. And she'd done BBC Question Time previously. And I was saying, oh, Paris, I'm so upset. It's gone terrible. It was awful. Yeah. And she was saying, oh my God, you know what's happened, blah, 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 blah. And I said, I can't even switch my phone. I'm ringing you, but I can't go on social media because, you know, it's going to be terrible, blah, blah, blah. But actually, that advice from my mum had actually turned out really well, because what had happened was the public had seen the bullying.
Exactly,
And the fact that I'd kind of just kept quiet and let them spew out all the venom.
Very,
It
very
actually
good.
worked to my benefit on that occasion.
Because there was a lot of support, wasn't there?
There was online, yeah.
Yes.
But it just shows you how the perception from when you're in a room doing a TV show or a radio show or even a podcast, I guess, can be completely different
Yes.
to what the person sat at home in their living room. Let's hope this is a positive reception.
Hope so. Yes. But I was going to ask you, you receive on a daily basis so many toxic messages.
Yeah.
How do you manage it so it doesn't destroy you? And why haven't you considered coming off social media?
I don't manage is the honest answer. I'm human like anyone else.
Yeah.
I've kind of grown a bit of a skin to it now, but that doesn't mean that on certain days, if I've had a crappy kind of day, and you come home and you go on social media and you're getting all this abuse that it doesn't get through and hurt you. It's horrible, not just for me, for my family as well, and my friends, and what have you. But I can't, because of what I do. As I'm a broadcaster and journalist at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And because of the situation that the trans community is in that we have no platforms, we're literally banned from mainstream media in the UK. So our only means of responding to all this negativity that's out there is on platforms such as Twitter. So
do you feel a sense of responsibility to speak up for the trans community?
I do, and I never wanted it. I'm really. I'd like to mention something here, actually. Just when as I explained at the very start, I kept who I was.
Yeah.
A complete secret from everybody. So I didn't know any trans people. I didn't know any gay people. I just had what I would call in speech marks. I'm using these words in a very aware way. I had what was known as a very normal life beforehand. But then when I'd done Loose Women, and it became a big national story that, Britain's trans newsreader, a lot of LGBT organisations and individuals swamped me. They were sending messages, and the messages were, they're friendly enough. But they were telling me, we need you to say this, we need you to do that, we need you to do that. And I was thinking, whoa, hold on a sec. I've spent all my life just wanting to be myself. And I've just reached this moment. I don't want to be part of a community. The actual word community scared me because I'd always been like an individual, do my own thing. And I didn't want to be part of a community. And it got to a stage where I felt so overwhelmed, I lashed out at the actual LGBT community. I didn't want anything to do with them because they were pestering me too much. And I started snapping at them as well online. And I was saying things like, I'm not part of your community, back off, I'm my own person. Yeah. But because of what's actually happened in the intervening years, I've learned a really sharp lesson. I guess I'm the definition of woke, in the sense that, woke is about being aware and open to new perspectives. And it's been, even for me as a trans person, a real education over the last 7 or 8 years about what LGBT is all about, why it's important to stick together. It's helped me be more racially aware of things in so many ways. It's been such a positive thing. All this poison is actually there is it sounds weird, but the positive side is that you become more aware of how important it is to stick together and to stand up for what is right.
Well, I hope people listening to this podcast might have more understanding about what it feels like to be trans, and there must be thousands of people who dare not speak up for fear of the response. So finally, I'd like to ask you, what advice would you give anyone who feels like you did all those years ago and is struggling to find their voice?
Well, my advice to somebody who's in the situation that I was all those years ago would be not to do what I did, and not to swallow down hard and keep it all secret. Even though things are really bad at the moment, we do have social media, and while there's a negative side to that, there's also a positive in that there are communities and people can see that there are people like themselves out there. And my advice to somebody, particularly younger people, would be to try and make contact with them and find the courage to actually speak up. All the evidence shows that most mums and dads and good friends, when they hear the news that somebody's trans now, the chances are they're going to be on your side, because you're not changing, and you know that you yourself are not changing. All you're doing is explaining to somebody who you are, and they don't want to lose that relative, and they don't want to lose that friend. So definitely find the courage and speak up as soon as you possibly can, because you cannot put a price on being yourself, and you do not want to waste the one life that you have, which is so precious, being somebody who you never were.
India, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to The Courage to Speak, presented by me, Leonie Mellinger. The Courage to Speak is produced by Anushka Warden, with sound production by Theo Bosenket and music by Guy Pearson. For more information on The Courage to Speak, visit www.mellinger.co.uk.